Welcome to the Titan Data Solutions podcast. This is Tech Titan Spotlight. I'm Stefan Ferrari, Head of Technical Solutions at Titan. And I'm here today with Roland from Quantum. Thank you for joining us. Great to have you here. Do you want to give us a bit of background and introduce yourself?
Sure. So thanks for having me. Roland Rosenau. I run the EMEA pre-sales team for Quantum. I started like 1.5 years back. And I'm the Director of Systems Engineering. Right? Look after entire EMEA, so hence I'm here.
Brilliant. And what's your kind of background? What did you do before Quantum?
So before that, let's say if I go back to the early days of my IT career, which is like centuries back, there was Legato. I started as a system engineer, and from there I decided to join Data Domain very early. I was employee 41, right? So I'm the first technical resource out of EMEA, and I built the pre-sales team there, right? So. Wow. And but then they got acquired, and it was a little bit less fun, right? So I decided to do something else, join Fusion.io, right? So high-speed storage inside servers based on PCIe. After that, I joined Rubrik, cloud data management and cybersecurity. And that was actually a good, let's say, portfolio for joining Quantum.
Yeah, no, it's a great set of vendors that fit around. It kind of fits with what Quantum do, right? So. And while we're on that subject, I think Quantum's a long time in the industry. I think a lot of people know the name Quantum. I think known mainly for tape, which is, I think, a shame because there's obviously so much more that they do. Why don't you tell us a bit more about Quantum and what they do outside of those kind of environments?
Yeah. So I'm glad you actually say tape, because before that it was even hard drives, right? So that was how it all started.
Yeah.
So more than 40 years ago, Quantum is really one of the oldest IT companies still existing, right? As an independent company. But of course, we shifted, right? So we had to apply changes and make sure we're still, let's say, a company that looks after what the market needs. And but talking about tape, of course, when I was at Data Domain, we had a sticker saying tape sucks, right? And, over the years, I changed my mind, especially coming with ransomware attacks, right? Because you have a physical air gap on tape. You have the media in your hands that you can put wherever you want.
I would say you can't encrypt it if it's not online.
Right, exactly, right? So, and everybody who doesn't have a physical air gap, has a logical air gap, he says it's the same because they don't have a physical one. Right?
Yeah.
So, but that's only one part. And but we're also, of course, looking into S3 storage, so object storage, which is with all that unstructured data out there, an absolute must, right? And of course, we also do dedupe appliances. And so we actually, and we have high-speed NVMe storage, right? So if you look at the portfolio, it's actually quite interesting, right? So because we started as a company that did tape, and before that hard drives, and with coming out with our own S3 solution that is super modern and has a very good cold storage part to it. I think we will talk about this a little bit later. But so this is basically from the super fast NVMe Myriad to tape, which is, well, at scale and green, right? So we can cover the whole portfolio, whatever data.
You got to go the whole like data lifecycle there as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's tools to like help with moving and managing that data as well?
Yes. So we basically, we have our StoreNext system, which can be a scale-out NAS, but it can also do things like moving around data, like according to life cycles, right? But also we have the S3 solution can be based on flash, it can be based on hard drives, it can be based on tape, right? So, and you actually, with the lifecycle policy, decide yourself how long do you want to keep the data where, right? Because ultimately, when it comes to hundreds of petabytes or even exabytes of data, there is no alternative to tape, right?
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not. It is a little bit, let's say, limited, but it's the greenest, right? Because it's the only technology that once you've written to it, it doesn't consume any energy.
Yeah, right? So, exactly. That's a big thing at the moment as well. People want to reduce their carbon footprint and things like that. Obviously, ransomware is a whole other thing. But I think, obviously, Quantum sit in a few kind of market segments. But I think, obviously, data storage, data protection being kind of the main ones, and those fit into, I'd say backup is probably the one that Quantum sit the most in. What would you say are some of like the challenges that people are seeing at the moment in that world?
Well, the biggest problem is this whole deduplication thing is nice, right? So because when you look at the original history and why, let's say, hard drive based systems were actually the successes of tape, it was speed for backup, right? So you needed to be within a backup window, and then of course you write only the new blocks and the data is scattered. That's fine for saving space when backing up. It's of course not as good when you recover, right?
Yeah.
So, and this was fine at the days when you typically like 80 or 90% of your restores came from the last 5 days. But with ransomware kicking in, this can be totally different.
Yeah. The average dwell time now is 180 days.
Yes.
I think there's in there, and it's not just in your primary data either. It's in the backups.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to then dig back and find where that data is. But yeah, having that long-term area of storage is definitely right for tape. So I think we've seen a lot of that. I think also there's a lot of industries now where data retention is a big part of what they need to do. So that could be for legal reasons. Yep. And also now data is valuable. It doesn't matter what people hold. At some point, someone's going to want to do it. I think there's certain industries as well where long-term data retention. I know in life sciences is a great example. I know we actually worked on a project where we're using quantum. There's over 200 petabytes of storage holding genomic data. And in those worlds, they're still talking about tape because you might need to access some research that you did from 20 years ago, right? And you're going to keep that on disk. I don't think so.
No, but expensive.
Having the tools to do it is important. And again, people like that are concerned about ransomware as well. And I think it's obviously a big problem in the industry in general. Have you had any experience with quantum of like helping people recover from those kind of attacks? Or
Sure. What we do is typically you can actually be as granular as you want by running multiple backups. You can you can make things that we call so-called secure snapshots, so you cannot tamper with these. So whatever happens, or you need additional credentials to access these backups. So basically, it's an extra layer of security, right? And the bad thing about backup is nobody really wants it. It's like having an insurance, right? So, but if you
they need it,
yeah,
and then they're glad they've got it.
Yes, and the bad guys, right? So the hackers, what they do typically is they look after your backups first. So they encrypt your backups and they let you go, right? Feeling safe. And then all of a sudden it's day X and then you get the ransomware note, right? So the ransom note, whether they ask you to pay because they encrypted all your data, and you typically think, well, it doesn't really matter because I have my backup. But these backups are all long gone. Right?
Yeah.
So, and this is why doing backups only is not enough, right? And even protecting these is not enough. You need to do like a fire drill, right? So you need to, what happens if?
Yeah.
And
I've had a conversation with someone before where they say, we want to do a backup plan. Everyone's got a backup and disaster recovery plan. But unless you simulate it, unless you run it, unless you actually simulate what's going to happen in those environments, you don't know where it could fall over, right? You said time to recovery before. If someone says, okay, we've got a plan, and then they go through it and it takes 4 days to recover, that's 4 days of downtime, right? But yeah, with ransomware, it's exactly the same. I think people have got tools and they're doing these backups, they're doing those things to protect themselves, but it's the same thing. You have to have a plan. You can't just say, I've got ransomware protection, I've got cybersecurity. You have to have a plan, you have to test it, you have to execute it. You need to treat it exactly the same as you would with any other kind of backup scenario. But and I guess that's where, again, having a varied storage portfolio is helpful, because you've obviously got the S3 storage on active scale, and you can do object locking.
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. And then you've got your tape where you can have worm, and obviously the ones that are offline. So if we were talking about kind of a plan for how you might do this, so let's say ransomware and backup, and how would you structure it? What would be the kind of workflow to make sure someone has this kind of protection?
Yeah, so there are multiple approaches. Excuse me. So the first one is, of course, you typically back up to a T-loop appliance, which is the DXI, right? So this is generic, right? It's easy. All the backup software is supported, and then you can then you need to go further, right? So, and the next step will be having something like a secure snapshot, right? So you make it immutable against tampering. And then, of course, it's all a matter of, okay, this is the one thing, right? So, but if you get full access to this dedupe appliance, you can do with the backups whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so, because it's ultimately all these systems are Linux systems, right? So, and they have root access. And if you get this, you can do whatever you want. So you need to have an extra layer of security, right? So, and actually the recommendation is to have even 3 layers, right? So, and what we do is you have DXi as your layer 1, then you can actually back up to S3 because it's cheap and it goes at scale, right? And with and the next one is moving this to tape, right? And with tape, the nice thing is we offer things like what we call a ransom block. So what we do is we physically move a cabinet like by 5 millimeters to the right, so the barcodes can still be read. But to retrieve the tapes, you need physical access to the tape library. You need to go there, you need to push a button, and then it will go the 5 millimeters back, and then you can use them again. So this is the ultimate protection against hackers, right? Because they typically don't get access.
Exactly. Yeah, it's remote. Yeah. I think you've also got ActiveBot as well, right? That's right. That's another layer of protection.
Yes.
Like logical air gapping inside the library itself.
Yes, that's what you can do. So it makes it look like having multiple libraries with every of these logical partitions has their own set of credentials. So that means having one set of admin credentials is not enough, right? So this is like a classic is multi-factor authentication, which we also, of course, support for the DXi and also for our S3 solution. So you need 2 factors anyway to access it. And this is always, I used to compare this with if your bike gets stolen, it's typically because your lock was the worst, right? It's not the most valuable bike, but the lock was the easiest to crack.
Yeah, it's the old thing of you don't have to be the most secure, you just have to be more secure than the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because then they just move on and go somewhere else, right? So, but, I mean, actually, and this was something like the hackers used to give up when they saw, okay, there is MFA included, or there are multiple layers of protection. But they don't anymore because now this awareness has become so big that they need to find holes in your security structure, right?
Yeah.
So
and they're always hunting for them. They're inside. I know there's some interesting tools people are deploying now, like honeypots and things like that, where they'll pop up a device inside their network that looks weak to make sure there's no one dwelling in there because they'll dump on it. Stuff like that. No, it's really interesting. I think with ransomware as a whole, it's a big subject at the moment, but I think, do you think people are taking it as seriously as they should, or?
Well, no. So the clear answer is no, because everybody has heard of ransomware and ransomware attacks. Everybody sees it on the news that big companies get hit by ransomware attacks. The problem is everybody, and nowadays it's an old phrase that I use, but it's not a matter if you will be hit by a ransomware attack, it's a matter when. Right? So everybody, because this is with ransomware as a service, you can, on the darknet, you can actually hire people who do ransomware attacks, right? So it's easy. You can download full toolkits that allow you to do a ransomware or denial of service attacks, right? So it's so easy. And that means, of course, you need to do something. And this awareness, especially in SMB, with SMB companies and smaller companies, might have valuable data that still needs to rise, right? So there needs to be an awareness. I need to do something. And it's not only, let's say, perimeter protection and having a firewall. It's also what happens when, right? So if I really got hit, then I need the plan for the recovery, right? So that we discussed.
I think there's the plan for recovery, but I think, like we said, it's more of a holistic thing.
Yes.
It's having good hygiene inside the business, making sure people stand up, they don't leave their laptops on, little things like that, right? These are all things that stop people from getting in. But yeah, ransomware, I think in the enterprise is taken probably as seriously as it should.
Yes.
I think some people are smaller SMB customers may think, we're not going to get hit, we're not a big target, but right. If you're easy, if it's open goal.
Yeah, and the problem is these hackers are smart, right? So they look at your annual business reports, and the amount of ransom they ask for is exactly what you still could afford, right? So they're not going ahead and ask you for £5 million if you have a revenue of 500k, but if you have a revenue of 500k, they might ask you for £50,000, right? Which is still a lot of money.
Yeah.
And this is the bad thing, right? So this is actually done in a smart way. So because it won't kill you, right, if you pay the ransom, but of course, every ransom that is paid makes these hackers stronger, right? So because they can use that money to enhance their next attack.
The general, people would say, go to the police first, don't pay them, all that kind of stuff. I think some businesses are worried and they will just pay.
Yeah.
I think I've spoken to companies before and they say, our strategy is just to pay. And I said to them, do you think they're using really good encryption algorithms? Can you guarantee that your data is going to be unencrypted and usable?
Yeah, exactly.
Or are they actually even going to give you the decryption key? You don't know what's going to happen.
No.
You're taking a huge risk. I think that strategy is very, very dangerous. And if you do get your data back, and there's nothing saying that they haven't left something else in there, they can come back in 6 months later and do the same thing again. Yep. So it's getting the data, getting it out, getting it cleansed, making sure that you're back up and running again effectively, but also plug those vulnerabilities. I think regular checks on vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, all that kind of stuff. Now, I know we've got Cyber Essentials, and there's a lot of people who are going through those kind of things, but this isn't, that's good enough. This is the minimum.
Right.
There's so much further people can go. And I think having those kind of, it's almost a shameless plug here, but services available like we have from Titan. Great, because we can go in and we can do those kind of tests and scans and vulnerability stuff and really make sure people have got the best kind of posture. And it's not like someone's coming in and saying, we have this new great fancy tool, you should definitely buy it. It's this is where you're weak kind of thing. And I think a lot of companies need to engage with that kind of service, a lot more, and then have a plan, execute that plan, test that plan, and then simulate an attack. Because until you do that, you just don't know, really, do you?
Exactly. Yeah, and that, of course, brings us to why aren't these, let's say, fire drills run more often? Because it takes time, right? And the recovery is slow, and you need extra storage. And that is, of course, why it makes perfect sense to have super fast appliances that do your backups, because the faster these are, the faster you can do these fire drills.
Yeah.
Right? So you can say, okay, let's say all your data is encrypted at once, right? You have a sandbox, and then you play it, and you see how long does it really take, and how long can the company afford to actually not use that data. And in my former job, we worked actually with the police, and they do, after ransomware attacks, they do forensics, right? So, and then before people pay the ransom, they check, okay, this encryption, could this really be so good that if you get the decryption key, you get your data back? Or is it
unusable
anyway? Or is it unlikely that you might have a successful recovery? But even we saw cases where the police, they couldn't officially say they recommended paying the ransom, but they let's say off record, they said, pay it. We don't see a way to decrypt your data.
Wow. So, that's a difficult scenario to be in. So, well, let's get on to a little bit of the product and how Quantum sits in that space. I think the DXi is the best place to start because it's that initial entry point. I think deduplication, obviously storage is expensive. Using as little storage as you can is always helpful. The DXi has security features built into it as well. But there's some uniqueness around the way that the deduplication is done. So I know it uses variable length as opposed to
yes.
and things like that.
Yes, it is. So there are two things that are worth mentioning. One is we're using, of course, variable length. And so we detect, as many, let's say, alike patterns as possible. And we do it inline, right? So this is, before we write the data, we already do dedupe it. We don't do it as an extra process because that makes your whole concept a little bit more difficult to set up, right? So, and plus then we have, of course, multi-factor authentication, and we have, there was more coming, right? We do things like security officer feature where you need two people to do certain things like messing around with the system date, for example, right? So because this is a very easy way. Let's say you have a retention of 3 months and then the hacker just goes ahead and puts your date 1 year ahead. It's so, well, hopefully I'm not giving anyone ideas, right? But this is what they do, right? Because it's so super easy. And many people don't even think about this, because then your backup software and all your security mechanisms will think, okay, yeah, sure, I should keep this for 3 months, but I'm already 6 months late, right? So I will expire all these safe sets. And then you're done, right? Your data is gone and there is no way to get it back.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And this is just something that you need to be aware of, and why I need multiple layers of security, right? As I said before. So yes, this is as secure as it can be, but it's only one device, right? So you should have multiple. So it's a media break that is always recommended, right? So you should have at least 2 pieces of media where you have your backups. Right? So especially
that's the older 3-2-1.
Exactly.
That's now 3-2-1-1.
Yeah.
0.
Yeah, I think the 0 was added by Veeam, but yes, because it's zero risk, right? Which I wouldn't sign, right? So zero risk doesn't exist, right? So you can just be as safe, but this means 3 copies of data on 2 different pieces of media, right? I forgot what one was.
One of which being offsite and the other one being...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, again, all of that is kind of possible within the quantum portfolio. So every year we hit the DXI, that's going to do the duplication. You've got your secure snapshots. You've got your the protection of the clock thing. That's great. Yeah. And then directly attached to that DXI, you could hang a tape library. So you could have something like...
There is a path to tape, right? So this is the nice thing of Quantum being the tape guys, right? So just actually when I got the call whether I wanted to work for Quantum, I was like, the tape guys, right? So it was awesome. And yes, but nowadays having a direct path to tape is super efficient, right? Because it is fast, it's convenient, and it's also very resilient, right?
There's not many like traditional storage devices where you can attach tape directly to it as well. So having it directly into your DG appliance as well as just because I mean the DXI fundamentally it's a NAS, right?
Yes.
Obviously it's a very intelligent one that has all these additional features, but fundamentally it's a NAS. So having that hanging off the back is great, and then you can point another copy to S3, and then we're talking about something like ActiveScale, right?
Yeah.
And ActiveScale is scale out, massive object store. How many? What are we talking? Hundreds of petabytes in its top?
Yes, it really goes up to exabytes that we can, and we have a joint customer who's already using more than 200 petabytes.
Yes.
And the differentiating factors really come into play once you cross the petabyte threshold, right? So you get to vast amounts of data that you basically need to administrate, because then, let's say you're running thousands of hard drives in your system. That means there are lots of failures. These are mechanical drives. They will fail.
Again, it's not if, it's when. Right. They will die. Yeah.
Yes. Well, they're man-made. They will die. Right. So, and then of course, if you have to do something like a rebuild, and this is if you compare solutions, yes, they talk S3, but many of the solutions are just an S3 gateway with having a standard file system in the back. And that means you need to really do a rebuild, like in a RAID, right? And if you're talking 22 terabyte drives, this can take long times. And of course, while these are rebuilding, you're exposed to a higher risk of data loss. Right. Yeah. So, and this is why we with ActiveScale have an independent system that has all the metadata. So if a hard drive fails, we don't care, right? We just make sure that the blocks that used to be on that drive will be copied again. So to get to the same, it's very, to explain in a very easy way, but this is how we do it, right? So there is no real rebalancing that is hardware based, right? Yeah. So that means typically there is like once a month, a service technician comes in and replaces a bunch of hard drives that have failed, right? So, and then you don't have to worry about degraded performance or waiting until it has the same level of resilience, because the resilience will always be the same as long as there is enough space on the system. And that's pretty unique, right? So,
wow, that's good. What's the kind of entry point for ActiveScale? Because I know a lot, you said when you get above a petabyte, is that the entry point, or
it's let's say where it gets interesting, this is around half a petabyte, right? So like 500 terabytes is where it might make sense to look into an S3 solution. You can start smaller, but of course the benefits won't be as high as then running just a regular RAID system and put it in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, we were talking a minute ago about recovery. So getting the data there is great. We've got lots of things now, so we're obviously looking from whatever your flavor of choice is for your backup software, going into your DXI. DXI does the deduplication, does your protected snapshots. We do a second copy onto tape and another copy to an S3 library, using your ActiveScale product. But when it comes to recovery, depending on how much data someone has to pull back, that time to recover can obviously vary quite a lot.
Yes.
And people want to get back and running as quickly as possible. So I'm aware that there's some flash-based stuff Quantum's just announced on in their products as well. So why don't we talk about those for a second?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, there is a, we call it the T10. So this is basically an all-flash system for the DXI, right? So, and the biggest advantage there is restore speed, right? So because the ingest doesn't vary so much from, let's say, the HDD-based systems that are out there, because you have to, it's still network protocols you're talking, and you saturate these lines, right? But recovery is the interesting part, right? As I mentioned earlier, dedupe is nice when writing data. Dedupe is less nice when you need to get the data back, right? And the older the backups are, the more scattered your data is all over the file system. With flash, this actually has some impact, but this is maybe measurable, but not noticeable. Yeah, and then of course the devices themselves are faster than hard drives, right? So everything is faster. So the rebuild, because typically all these dedupe appliances work with RAID 6, right? So dual parity. So the rebuild takes time. On flash, this is also so much faster because the throughput is faster. So it's actually ideal. And with QLC, so the latest flash technology, it becomes absolutely affordable, right? Especially for your precious data where you say, okay, these are my databases that I need to get back. You can actually really you have the choice, right? So what do I put on these super fast appliances? But if you compare them to others, the prices are really reasonable.
Right. Also, again, because you've got those DG rates, I mean, I know deduplication is a difficult subject because everyone's data set is different. There's no way of predicting. These are heavy caveats. But I mean, I've seen real world deduplication rates of like 22 to 1 on the DXI. But yeah, I think still 22 to 1 or 20 to 1, 10 to 1 even. You know, if you've got a data set of a petabyte, you're now talking 100 terabytes.
Exactly.
It's a huge reduction.
It's 90% data reduction, right? So 1 to 10. So it's, and if you look, and 1 to 20 is 95%, right? So if you look this as the percentage, but of course, coming from the dedupe world, these numbers are, they're okay, but you don't find an unhappy customer because the dedupe is only 1 to 8 and he expected 1 to 10. You have an unhappy customer if he can't recover, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So I guess with the flash system as well, obviously your backup is going to be faster because you're going into flash. Does it speed up the inline dedupe as well?
Not really, because this is basically CPU constrained, right? So there's a lot of CPU that is required. You need RAM. So as I said, the ingest, so the backups they will be slightly faster. So you can think about maybe 20% faster because you typically saturate the lines already when you're sending the data across the network, right? So, but the recovery, this can be up to 4 times faster, right? So, and that means, speaking of these fire drills, this fire drill will be 4 times faster, right? So you do a recovery, you find out, okay, all the data is there, you can spin up virtual machines, you can spin up your database, you can see, okay, it's up and running within X minutes, right? So this is what I can do. And then, of course, the ransomware attack was useless because all the recoveries are coming so fast, right?
Yeah. So let's say someone gets in, right? They've got into your system. Your initial backups are done, and okay, we're going to go back to my active vault. So I've got those offline tapes from 6 months ago. We're going to pull those back in, and we're going to see if those are working. What would the recovery time be like for someone pulling back from the tape? Because I think people think tape's quite slow, right? But
you typically, what you do is, of course, you work with multiple tape drives, right? So you're still talking gigabytes of seconds when recovering data, right? In one stream. And then, of course, if you have 10, 15, 16 tape drives, this 16 folds or puts it in, it's only a 16th of the amount of time that you would need to just one drive.
Yeah.
If you do it in a smart way, if you share the tapes, if you make sure you use enough tapes so you have the tape mounts, because the storage system can take in a lot of data, right? So again, your mileage varies, right? It's very hard to say it will be this fast. A terabyte will take that long. That's really not easy to say, but if you do it in a smart way and you have, let's say, a selected number of tapes, so you minimize the amount of tapes, the tape mounts, and you make sure all this data can be taken back at once, you will have still a very reasonable time for recovery.
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception, isn't it, around tape? I think that's, again, because I think it's, like you said, people don't want to spend money on their backups, right? Because it's just seen as like, it's a worst case scenario. I might have to use it, but if I never do, kind of thing. It's similar to insurance.
Absolutely.
People go, it's great when you want it, but so if we go out from that and we look at the active scale, obviously that's spinning disks, that's always online. You've obviously got scale out as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking much, much faster recovery rates when we look at that. And there's data protection mechanisms in there as well. So we've got object lock, all that kind of stuff. So when you start grouping those things together, I mean, S3, when you start using it in an active scale, it's kind of that, it's like using cloud, but it's your own, right? You know?
Yes.
Because I always say the cloud's just someone else's computer. So this is just your version, right, in the building, and you can back up to that.
Yeah, and this is the nice thing with that. So it's really like Glacier, right? So many people don't know this, but Glacier is based on tape, right? Yeah. So, and the SLA for Glacier typically is up to 2 weeks, right? So for the recovery. And this is why people really, this whole cloud repatriation thing is exactly for that reason, right? So people think, I cannot afford this. I cannot wait for my data. It's cheap, right? And but the egress costs are high.
Yeah.
And if I need it faster, I need to pay so much more that it's absolutely worthwhile maybe to put your own Glacier system in your data center, right? So, and that's what we can provide, right? And all the modern backup softwares now provide a path to S3, right? So, and even we call it cold storage, right? So that means you have parts on spinning disks, and then with the lifecycle policy, you move it off to tape, right? So, and then when doing the recovery, it needs to come from tape because we do it in a very smart way. We're talking, let's say, like 15 to 20 minutes or maybe an hour compared to 2 weeks when you have it in the cloud, right? So,
like we said as well, when you're in that phase and your business is down and everything's gone, every minute counts, right? It's because I know there's a lot of people that talk about ransomware and stuff, but it is true, right? If your company goes down and it's down for 10 minutes or an hour, the money you lose increases because you've got more people that can't be serviced, you've got more people going at what's going on. But then you've also got the longer term effects, the reputational damage or other things that come into it as well. So having the plan, using these kind of resources, getting back up and running as quickly as possible, I don't think you can do that unless you're doing on-prem. You just can't. I mean, I think because you said about the recovery time for Glacier, I think that's just to get it into a normal S3 bucket, right? You've then still got to bring it back on site. Yeah. If you're limited by your internet connection, so you're talking, I mean, even in the best will in the world, you're still going to be slower than tape.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Or imagine a 10 gigabit link to the cloud costs you a fortune.
Yeah,
so
thousands. Yeah, thousands.
Excuse me. Yeah, but this is exactly the point. And this is why there is a trend that we see where people think, no, I'm done with the cloud, right? So it was a little bit like a drug dealer who gives you the first portion for free, right? Because it's just take it, it's for free. Because they said, store data here, it's for free.
Yeah.
So, but when you need it back, you need to pay.
Yeah.
Right? So, and this is where people realize this is so expensive, it's actually cheaper. And I'm the master of my data. So looking at compliance and the data is not allowed to leave the country, all of that, you can make sure this is the case.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and I know there's some people concerned about things like the Patriot Act as well, where actually the American government can actually get access to data.
Oh yeah.
That's a concern for some people.
Yeah. In Germany, we had a big scandal where the NSA was looking after Chancellor Merkel's mobile phone. Right. So they had a Trojan on it, right? So, and that means there is a lot of reluctance to put data to an American cloud provider, right? So, and all your backups, so that means all your data is there, right? So, and but that's only one thing. And even if they guarantee, no, it won't leave the country, if it's all yours, you're still not your master, right? But if you have it on your own premise, then you know what's happening to your data, right? So
no, and I think we've gone through a lot of stuff there. But is there anything on the horizon for quantum that we're allowed to talk about, which is the kind of latest and greatest? I know we've spoken about you've got end-to-end data, but what's kind of the next step? What's coming?
I mentioned it briefly in the beginning, right, when I said we also have this super fast storage that is, and we call it Myriad, and this is our latest product. It is NVMe based, so super fast, super low latency. It's orchestrated by Kubernetes, right? So that makes you cloud ready, right? So if you want to run it in the cloud,
Elastic and kind of stuff as well. Yeah.
Yes, and it's you see, and we're talking really 30, 40 gigabytes per second throughput, right? Reading and writing. So, and then of course, talking about backup, this can also be a target for backups. Let's say if you do backups for your virtual machines and you have a problem, you can spin up these virtual machines on that system, right? You just can spin up your Oracle databases there, right? And then do a live migration back to your primary storage once it's back up.
Is that so that'll run that backup inside the actual Myriad system itself?
You need a tool, right? So that's for Oracle, you would use Almond, right? So use NFS. But we make sure there is redundancy. We make sure also, of course, we have snapshots and clones. When we're talking about ransomware protection, we can actually take snapshots, which is like a real copy of the data, right? And we can hide the snapshot from the operating system. So you need to find it back, you need to know where it is. So even if you have root access to the system, you cannot find this snapshot unless you know where you stored it. Right, so
is that Myriad's kind of main use case? Then is it for backup or
it's one, right? So of course others are video rendering, right? So because when really every second counts, because the faster you do the rendering, the more money you save, right? So that's of course data lakes when you process a lot of data, and if the customers who tried Myriad, what everybody said was with that small footprint of hardware, we get to an amazing performance, right? So because everybody can get to this performance, but they need way more hardware.
So what is the footprint?
It's so it starts with 5 nodes that are storage nodes. So there are just NVMe drives in there, right? So but of course it scales out to as many nodes as you like. You have 2 nodes for, let's say, orchestrating the whole thing, and you have a deployment node, right? So you start with 8 nodes. As it looks, it's, as I said, and it's as it based.
Sounds like a lot, but they're 1 U.
Yeah, right? It's small, right? It's of course, but we're still talking. Yeah, you need to. It is multiple hundred terabytes of data where you start, right? But it's unless you really need this, and we're looking into smaller systems as well. But this is where we are now.
I think there's still a question around density, right? Rack space costs money.
Yes.
So, and SSDs are more dense than hard drive now. You know, we can get a single SSD with 64 terabytes or 60 or 61, I think, terabytes in a single drive.
Yeah.
So they're very expensive, but you can do it. So I think you touched a minute ago on kind of video rendering and media and entertainment. I think that's probably an area where Quantum's actually been probably one of the leaders in the space for a long time. So it makes sense this product is kind of there. Because you got StoreNext, which is kind of the standard for those kind of people. And so will Myriad work alongside all of the other products in that kind of media workflow?
Yeah, of course. So this is the idea, right? So you purchase a Myriad together with a StoreNext, so you get all the features that you need in the M&E industry to make sure you get it done, plus a super fast performing storage device that makes it even faster, right? So yeah, that's the idea.
It's amazing. Well, I think we've had a really good look through the portfolio. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I think we've got a good idea now where Quantum sit, the products you've got, and I think it's great to be able to just kind of shine a spotlight on everything on the tape.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Obviously the tape's still there. Like we said, it's not dead by any means. I think that there's still a huge place for tape. I don't see it going anywhere for a really long time.
No, and it's still, if you look at the reports, there is not massive growth, but it grows like 5 to 7% a year, right? And with LTO 10 on the horizon, right? So that it will be even denser, right? And even more resilient. This is the good thing, right? So and yes, tape is limited. Tape is a sequential piece of media, right? But it has its use case, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
So, and that's unbeatable with any other storage.
Yeah, $1 per terabyte,
exactly.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's brilliant. So, yeah, really appreciate you coming and taking the time. Thank you very much. And we'll hopefully look forward to getting you on another episode later on where we get to maybe have a look at Myriad in a bit more depth or something.
Sure, we can do that.
Do a demo or something, yeah?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I really enjoyed it. And anytime.
Thank you very much. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you on the next Tech Titan Spotlight.